Hey, welcome back to the main point. Andre here with part two of our video series that we're doing with regard to parental discipline, all right, or parental chastisement from a biblical perspective, all right. So in our previous video, all right, we were looking at parents as disciplinarians, all right, and we looked at God as a disciplinarian. I put that in reverse order. First, we looked at God as a disciplinarian, all right, in Leviticus chapter 26, all right, where we learned about why God disciplines his children. All right, we gained a true perspective on why God is often wrongly charged with evil. All right, if you haven't seen that video, I encourage you to go back and take a look at it. And then we looked at parents as disciplinarians. All right, and how there is life within the command. All right, there's life within instruction. All right, when that instruction is coming from God, number one, and when that instruction is coming from a parent, all right, that has the child's truest best interest at heart. All right, there's life within those instructions and in those commands. All right, we looked at the principle of law and consequence. All right, we saw that in Leviticus. All right, how God was informing his children and warning them, hey, you continue to do what you're doing, these things are going to happen as a consequence or as a result. All right, so there's law and consequence, and that's needed not only within society, we see it definitely within society, but it's needed within the family structure as well. There must be law, standards, all right, and there must be consequences when those standards are not upheld, all right? And lastly, we looked at, we established parental chastisement. Really, this was the whole purpose of that last video. We established parental chastisement as a biblical principle, all right? All right, so if anybody comes to you saying that it's wrong to spank your children or it's wrong to reprove your child, that doesn't always mean spankings, okay? If anybody says that it's wrong for you to correct your children on any level, they're wrong because that's not biblically inspired, all right? Those words aren't biblically sound. All right? It is right to spank your children. It is right to discipline and reprove your children. God expects us to, all right? All right, so that was for the last video. This video's inspiration is a direct response to our subscribers' requests, and really our subscriber inspired these last two videos, the last one and this one that we're posting now. But this is a direct response because we want to look at 4 specific questions that our subscriber asked, which we greatly appreciate. Thank you. All right, seriously. All right, the first question was, what spanking from a Christian perspective should look like? What should that look like from a Christian perspective? How do we distinguish between healthy and effective discipline and abuse? And should spanking be over the knee? And then last question, is there a correct way to give a spanking? All right, so we're going to look at those. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. All right, actually, before we dive into it, I guess this could be part of it. Did some reading a while back, and these questions kind of sparked the memory of it. There's a guy by the name of Paul Wagner. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a distinguished professor, all right, of the Old Testament. And in one of his published articles, he lays out, he has an outline, essentially, that he pulled from the book of Proverbs, that he dissected from Proverbs. He has an outline of how a child should be disciplined from least, or from least down here to greatest. All right, least to greatest, how a child should be disciplined. And I just want to read what he says here, because I think it's good. Because when we think of discipline, all right, we think of disciplining our children, we often only associate that with spankings. All right, but there's so much more involved in disciplining our children than just spankings. Spankings is like one tool in the entire tool belt. All right, it's one method that we can employ and that we should employ when necessary. But I'll tell you that even a proper look at your child, all right, can be a form of reproof. It can be even a look. All right, from a look all the way to a spanking. All right. There is so much in between that we can use as parents to get our children on the right path. All right. And I just want to share some of what he shared in his article. All right. And he says here, it's summarized here. He pulled all of this. All right. This was inspired by the book of Proverbs. All right. And so we'll go over the first 6 levels. There's 6 levels here. There's 8 total, but we'll go over 6. All right. The first 6. He says, number 1. All right. This is from least. All right. So the least amount of correction or least amount of discipline to the greatest amount of discipline being corporal punishment or spankings. So the first one, he says, level 1, encourage proper behavior. All right. Encourage proper behavior. My son isn't doing what I told him to clean up the toys. He hasn't cleaned up his toys. Instead of just spanking him because he didn't clean up his toys, let's not jump all the way to step 6. Let's start with step 1. Hey, Sonny, listen, I want you to clean up your toys, man. You know, I told you to clean them up. So go ahead, clean them up. That's step 1. Let's see how he responds. I don't know. All right. And then step 2 says, in form of improper behavior. All right. There's levels. In form of improper. Hey, son, you're not doing what I told you to do. That's improper. It's not right. You're not obeying me. I need you to obey me. Go ahead and clean up your toys. All right. Let's go to level 3. Explain the negative consequences of sin. All right. So if the behavior persists, listen, let's sit our children down. And let's begin to explain about the negative consequences of sin and how sin is woven within the flesh and how sin desires to buck up against authority and to not obey the instructions of parents. All right. Let's sit down and let's look at it together so that there's an understanding that's brought about in their minds, so that when the next time they feel tempted to go against your instructions, they're reminded, that's sin within me, or that's sin woven within me. And my mommy and my daddy told me not to listen to that voice. All right. So let's consider that. So that was step 3, explain the negative consequences of sin. And then step 4, gently exhort. All right. Gently exhort. All right. Gently correct. All right. Bring about correction. Gently. Do it gently. All right. And then let's go to step 5. He says gently rebuke or reprove. All right. And then step 6, he says, apply corporal punishment. All right. That doesn't cause physical harm. All right. Those are the 6 steps. All right. But I wanted to share that because I think it's really good. There's we don't always have to just jump to spanking. All right. We can pause in the moment and use wisdom. Which method should I employ in this situation? Because if I'm in the grocery store, all right, my children aren't acting right, my son or my daughter's not doing what I'm telling them to do, I may, depending on what they're doing, how disrespectful, what level, I may pull them aside, take them outside, take them to the bathroom, or I may just give them a stern look, or I may just, have a stern talking to them. These are not weapons. I'm sorry. These are not weapons. These are methods, all right, that we can employ. All right. These are methods we can employ. Let's jump into it. All right. So first question, what does spanking or parental chastisement look like from a Christian perspective? What does it look like? All right. So I think the first thing we need to consider is that as Christians, all right, we are to exude the love of Christ toward all people, to include our children. All right. We're to exude, all right, that love of Christ. 1 John 4:11, chapter 4, verse 11 says, beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. God's called us to love because he loves, because he did love us. All right. So we're to exude the love of Christ. So the simple answer is that Christians are to chastise their children from a heart of love towards the child. When love is the motive behind the correction is effective. All right, listen, it's effective when it's love inspired, and it will produce fruit in the child in time. It will. It absolutely will. And I know it will because I've seen it in my own children. And I know it will because I've seen it in me, how God has loved me through correction and how it's brought about fruit in my life. I know it will, but it has to be from love. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11 tells us, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous. Nobody, I don't care who you are, ever gets excited about getting a spanking. Unless when your parents spanked you, you knew that it wouldn't hurt. All right. Nobody gets excited about being disciplined. And it's not even just spankings. Not everybody doesn't like correction. It makes us feel like real bad. Like, you know, that's how it makes you feel when you get corrected. At least it does me sometimes. I mean, I've grown, but sometimes it doesn't feel good. Somebody comes to you and says, "Hey man, you ate up. You need to get it right. You need to straighten up. You jacked up." You know, it doesn't always feel good. That's what the scripture says here. Now, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous. It says, but grievous. Doesn't feel good. Nevertheless, afterward, it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Fruit comes as a result of correction, of chastisement. When you take it says unto them that have been exercised thereby, meaning I have taken the chastisement and applied it. Someone corrected me and I made the adjustments so as to not repeat the conduct that caused them to correct me in the first place. A peaceable fruit of righteousness comes about as a result. All right. And this leads into the next question our viewer has asked. All right. Question number 2. How do we distinguish between healthy and effective discipline and abuse? All right. So let's approach this question this way. All right. World Book defines abuse this way. It says to use wrongly, to misuse, to treat badly, to use harsh or insulting language about or to. That's what abuse means. Misuse, bad, harsh, and insulting. All right. So the simple answer to this question is this. When our correction, whether verbal or physical as parents, veers from what may be reasonably perceived as natural affection and care, abuse may be in practice. All right. I'll say it again. When our correction, whether verbal or physical, veers away from what may be reasonably perceived as natural affection and care, abuse may be in practice. All right. You have to remember what abuse is. What we just defined it. It's harshness. It's to treat badly. It's to use wrongly. All right. So if there's a bystander, all right, that's standing by as you're disciplining your child, whether it be verbal, you're yelling at them, you're yelling, and everything's, your veins are popping out your neck and you're using demeaning words and words that cause them to feel down and like nothing. And a bystander feels like they should jump in and say something, then it's probably abuse, because it's not reasonably perceived as natural affection and care. It's reasonably perceived as abuse. That's not proper. You shouldn't be, screaming at your children. All right. Or you shouldn't be excessively, spanking your children. Let's move on. All right. So if your conscience this is another way to determine this, how you can delineate between healthy correction and abuse. If your conscience is knocking on the door of your heart because of how you're going about disciplining your child, it's likely that abuse is in practice. If your conscience is brought into question, you find yourself rolling it over in your mind, the things that you've done and how you went about it, and you feel a sense of shame and guiltiness as a result, it's likely abuse is in practice. Another one, if someone, whether a spouse, friend, or another person, feels the need to intervene during you disciplining your child, abuse may be in practice. I didn't say it is. I said it may be, because that person may not be a reasonable person, to be honest. That may just be a person that thinks that any form of discipline, any form of correction that a parent gives towards their child is wrong. All right. And that doesn't mean that you're wrong because they feel that way. It has to be reasonably perceived by a reasonable person. All right. But all in all, we distinguish between healthy discipline and abuse by examining our motive for the correction. All right, we have to look at our motives for the correction. And this is what we ask ourselves. To correct, am I disciplining my child to correct corrupt behavior? Or am I disciplining my child to unleash pent up anger and frustration? Is my motive one of love? I see that their conduct is not proper, not right, not according to scripture, not according to what I've told them. Then I need to correct them. Or is my motive, I'm just so angry, I'm so frustrated with them, I'm going to unleash it in this moment. All right. It's not, so if it's not from a place of sincere love, abuse, it's likely in practice. All right. All right. So that was question number 2. And questions 3 and 4, we grouped together. Okay. All right. Which were, should spanking be over the knee? And is there a correct way to give a spanking? All right. All right, so let's get into it. The Bible does not mandate, all right, a particular instrument to be used in discipline. All right. We know the book of Proverbs tells us spare the rod. You know, if you spare the rod, that's not a good thing. It does say rod, but that's not a mandate on parents to use a rod, you know, to spank your child. Okay. There's no specific mandate. All right. For us to use a specific instrument to be used in discipline. God simply instructs us through his word that parents are to discipline their children, okay? We're to discipline them. We're to correct them as he does us. All right, something to consider. All right, when you're thinking about this question, does the instrument that you're using cause more discomfort than is necessary? Think about it. Remember that the reason for discipline is to alert the child of the severity of their rebellion. This looks different, all right, for different ages and different genders, all right? So is the instrument that I'm using causing more discomfort than is necessary? If so, then I don't need to use that, okay? And discipline looks different, all right, for different genders and different ages. I remember, you know, my daughter right now is 7. My son is 3. All right, then I have a youngest at 9 months. My youngest 9 months. But when my daughter was my son's age at 3, I rarely had to spank her physically. I think it's just a father and daughter thing. All it would take was just a stern look, and she would melt. Okay, and she would correct the behavior just off of a look. It wasn't always the case. There were times where I did have to spank her, but those were few and far in between. And so it's different for different children, or different children, different genders, and different ages. All right. And so that answers the questions. All right. Oh, and should spanking be over the knee? I think that answers that question as well. The Bible doesn't mandate that spanking should be over the knee. I think that is a good method that you could use. All right. Because you're able to gauge, you know, the amount of force that you're applying, and it's not as easy. It's not hard. It's not easy to, you know, for instance, if you were using a instrument or something else, I don't know, a switch. You know, people use switches in the South. I think they still do. I don't know, but it can be easy to hit the child, you know, in a place on the body that is not desirable, in the eye, you know, on the back of the neck. I don't know, or extension cords, and you know, I would stay away from, you know, an extension cord. Definitely, like, no. But over the knee, absolutely. I think that's a good method, but it's not mandated. So it's up to you. It's up to your discretion. Certainly pray about it, and seek counsel from the Holy Spirit. All right. And he will guide you in that. He will guide you in that. Okay. All right. And so just for a final word, just wanted to share something that I read that I thought was really, really, really good analogy to describe discipline and how discipline should be applied. All right. It's taken from an ancient Jewish text. All right. And I think it's really good. Paints a beautiful illustration of what healthy parental chastisement should look like. And what it says in the text is, it says with a child, all right, as parents, we're to push them away with the left hand, being the weaker hand. But it says that we're to pull them or draw them with the right hand. All right. The right hand being the stronger hand. All right. So it looks like this. It looks like this. You're pushing and you're pulling. All right. I'm pushing with my weak and I'm pulling with my strong. All right. And so what am I pushing? I thought that was beautiful. What am I pushing? Well, I'm pushing away that bad behavior. I'm pushing away that sinful nature. I'm pushing away that rebellion and that folly that's bound up in my child's heart. I'm pushing it away with my left. But all simultaneously, I'm pulling him and her with my right through love. And that's what we said. That's what we were saying. Love has to be the motive behind you disciplining your child. Otherwise, it's just abuse. I've seen it done, in family members, and I've seen it, done in different settings. It has to be from a place of love. All right. So we push with the left. We pull with the right. And how do you pull? You teach them. All right. You teach them, the standards that God expects, that you expect. You teach them why. I'm pulling you. I want you to know that. I want you to understand that as my child, we have a way of living that is proper, that is right, according to God and according to the scriptures. And I want you to come into this understanding. So I'm pulling you constantly, daily, moment by moment, every day. I'm pulling you as God would instruct the children of Israel, as they would go in by the way, in the street, while they were at home. They were to teach their children the laws of God. They were to teach their children his precepts. God was instructing them to pull them in. Because if you don't teach God, if you don't teach your children the word of God, all right, doesn't mean it has to be a formal Bible study in your house or anything, but just open the scriptures up, begin to read, begin to teach them what you know. You don't have to know it all, but teach them what you know. When you do that, then it really begins to feed that hunger that they have on the inside, and they want more of it. And it causes them to gravitate towards righteousness, to love righteousness. All right. When you teach them and you live what you teach. All right. All right. So just wanted to share that illustration with you. I hope that I answered the questions. I believe I did. And I hope that it was a blessing to you. It really was a blessing to me to begin to study it out, look at it in the scriptures, and gain an understanding myself, better understanding myself. Again, if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out, comment, and we'll do our best to answer those questions and help you out in any way that we can. All right, that's all that I have. I'll see y'all next time at the point.